You know, when a famous person dies, it just hits different. It's more than a news story, right? It becomes this global moment, a kind of shared shock that we all experience together. So today, we're going to dive into what's really going on behind these headlines. This comment about Michael Jackson, it just nails that feeling, doesn't it? These people aren't just strangers. For a lot of us, they're the soundtrack of our lives, the faces we grew up with on screen. So when they're gone, it can feel, well, surprisingly personal, almost like an era has ended. And that's the real question, the one we're really digging into here. We're going to look at the stories that we can't seem to forget, the patterns that start to show up, and even some hard data that uncovers the hidden risks of living your life in the spotlight. Okay, so let's start with some of the cases that are just permanently lodged in our collective memory. You know, the ones they're filled with so much mystery and unanswered questions that we're still talking about them decades later. Marilyn Monroe is the perfect example. Officially, her death was ruled a probable suicide from a drug overdose. But the autopsy found something weird. There was no pill residue in her stomach. Think about that. That one little detail, plus her well-known connections to JFK and his brother Robert, has fueled conspiracy theories ever since. And then you have the murder of the notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace. This is hands down one of the most infamous unsolved cases in music history. And the timing is everything, right? It happened just 6 months after his rival, Tupac, was killed. So immediately everyone thought it was retaliation in that whole East Coast-West Coast feud. Some people, including former FBI agents, think it was a hit ordered by Suge Knight at Death Row Records, maybe even with help from dirty LAPD cops. But then there are the deaths that shock us for a totally different reason. Not because of mystery, but because of what they reveal about the private pain of the stars we loved the most. I mean, Robin Williams, he brought so much joy to the world. His death in 2014 felt like a punch to the gut for everyone. At first, it was linked to his struggles with depression and a new Parkinson's diagnosis. But the real story, the full story, was somehow even more heartbreaking. And here it is. This is the hidden tragedy. The autopsy showed that Robin Williams didn't have Parkinson's. He was suffering from something called Lewy body dementia. It's a brutal, aggressive brain disease that causes paranoia, anxiety, and confusion. And maybe the worst part of it all, he never knew. He never knew the real name of what was taking over his mind. So these individual stories are just incredibly powerful. But they also make you step back and wonder, is there something bigger going on here? Are these just a bunch of sad, isolated incidents? Or do they point to a much darker pattern that's connected to fame itself? So to figure that out, we have to zoom out. We have to move past the individual stories and look at the bigger picture. And when you do that, yeah, patterns definitely start to emerge. The answer, unfortunately, seems to be yes. And it starts with this number, 27. This number has become totally infamous in pop culture. They call it the 27 Club. Now, it's not a real club, of course. It's a hauntingly long list of incredible musicians who all died at that exact same tragically young age. I mean, just look at this list of members. It's staggering. We're talking about the founder of the Rolling Stones, rock and roll pioneers, the voice of a generation, a modern soul icon. The sheer number of brilliant artists who all checked out at age 27 is a pattern that's just impossible to ignore. And it's almost always tied to the intense pressures of fame and substance abuse. Now, patterns like the 27 Club are compelling, but they're still just observations. To really understand the risks here, we need to go deeper. We need cold, hard data. And a recent study did exactly that by focusing on a particularly vulnerable part of the entertainment industry, one whose experiences might just be a magnified version of the risks we see everywhere else. The study is called Jane Crow, and it was published in 2024. It's a really rigorous, data-driven look at premature deaths in the adult film industry. The researchers argue that performers in this space often face this unique, toxic combination of incredible pressure and being pushed to the margins of society. And that name, Jane Crow, was chosen very deliberately. It's meant to echo the systemic segregation of the Jim Crow laws. The argument is that these female performers are often isolated, totally cut off from the healthcare and support systems that could literally save their lives. And trust me, this wasn't just a casual glance. The researchers used a super strict scientific method to make sure their results were solid. You can see that process here. They started with hundreds of potential records and methodically narrowed it all down to the 25 most relevant, highest quality studies for their final analysis. So what did they actually find? Well, looking at a group of more than 1,600 deaths, medical issues were number one. But look at the next two categories, suicide and overdose. If you put those two together, they account for over 13% of all the deaths. That is a significant and really tragic figure. And when they dug deeper into those overdose stats, a very clear culprit appeared. Illicit opioids, we're talking heroin and fentanyl, were responsible for more than half of them. This is a direct line connecting the risks inside this industry to the massive public health crisis we're all dealing with. Yeah, to figure out just how at risk these people were, the study did something really clever. The researchers took a standard medical screening tool, it's called the opioid risk tool, and they post-mortemly applied it to 56 performers who had died. Basically, the tool looks at things like family history, personal history of substance abuse, and psychological issues to calculate a person's risk level. The results are, honestly, they're staggering. Out of the 56 performers they analyzed, two-thirds fell into the high-risk category for opioid abuse. The other third were moderate risk. But the most powerful number on this chart, 0. Not a single person in their sample was assessed as being low risk. This basically suggests these tragedies weren't random at all. They were predictable outcomes for a highly vulnerable group of people. So what's the solution here? Well, the study's authors don't just dump the problem on us. They actually propose a way forward. They're calling for medical and mental health professionals to step up and build screening and treatment programs inside the industry itself to find and help at-risk performers before it's too late. So, from the mysteries that still swirl around icons like Marilyn Monroe, to the cold, hard data about opioid risk, the stories of celebrity deaths show us a really complicated and often tragic reality. And it forces us to ask a tough question. As the people who consume the culture these stars create, what's our role? What's our responsibility? To understand and maybe even address the very real dangers that are hiding just outside that spotlight.